We all want to protect our money, right? I mean, with everything going on, like global uncertainty and all this talk about recessions, the future feels kind of shaky. That's what makes this article we're diving into today so interesting. It throws out this bold statement. By 2050, being wealthy will mean being a Bitcoiner.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought-provoking idea, especially now with all the buzz around crypto. But we need to be careful not to get ahead of ourselves, right? It's not about making guarantees. This isn't financial advice or anything. What we're doing here is exploring possible scenarios, thinking about what they could mean for the future of, like money and wealth and all that.
Exactly. So let's break down the article's arguments, right? One of the big things they talk about is inflation. They say it's eating away at everyone's wealth, even the super rich. But I don't know, isn't inflation more of a problem for like everyday stuff, groceries and gas prices? Does it really affect someone with like a huge investment portfolio?
That's a pretty common misunderstanding, actually. See, inflation, it doesn't pick and choose. While you notice it right away with everyday things, it's the sneaky long-term effects on big investments that should really worry the wealthy. Let's say someone has most of their wealth tied up in bonds. As inflation goes up, the returns on those bonds, they lose their value over time. It's like a slow leak, constantly draining your future wealth.
So even if you're not struggling to make ends meet, inflation is like this hidden danger eating away at your wealth over time. And that's where the article points to Bitcoin. They say, because Bitcoin has this fixed supply, it's like the perfect shield against inflation. How much truth is there to that? Is Bitcoin really the ultimate answer to inflation?
I mean, it's definitely got its appeal as an inflation hedge, right? Unlike the money governments print, which they can just make more of whenever, Bitcoin has a hard limit, only 21 million coins, ever. This really appeals to people who are worried about, like, their savings losing value because of government policies and stuff. But, and this is important, we can't forget how volatile Bitcoin is. Its price can go up and down like crazy in a really short amount of time, which makes you wonder, is it really the best way to store your wealth long term? Especially when you think about things like leaving money to your kids and having a stable financial future.
Yeah, it's that classic risk versus reward thing, right? We always hear about gold being the safe bet, but even gold has its ups and downs. So can we really compare Bitcoin to gold in that sense?
It's interesting, right? The article does make that comparison. They're both finite resources, meaning there's only so much of them, and their value doesn't come from some government decree. Historically, people have run to gold when the economy goes bad. But will Bitcoin follow the same path? Will it go from this speculative asset to something everyone sees as a store of value? Honestly, it's still too early to say, for sure.
It's like we're waiting to see how it all plays out. Now, the article takes a bit of an unexpected turn. It's just that a winnow dominated by Bitcoin could actually lead to a cultural shift. People would start to prioritize like quality and sustainability over, chasing the latest trends. That seems like a pretty big jump. How does a digital currency change how people shop?
It is a fascinating idea, isn't it? The article connects this to Bitcoin's long-term focus. The idea is, if you're holding on to Bitcoin as your store of value for years, maybe even decades, you'd be more likely to buy things that are built to last as well.
So instead of getting a new phone every year, you'd invest in one that's built to be like super durable, one that will last you a decade.
Exactly. Imagine if the fast fashion industry, where everything is disposable, was replaced with timeless designs, things built with real craftsmanship and made to last. It's about changing how we see value, moving away from this throwaway culture to something more, I don't know, meaningful. Now, we have to remember, this is just one possible outcome. It's not like Bitcoin magically changes everyone's behavior overnight. But the article makes the case that Bitcoin's whole philosophy of long-term value, it could end up influencing other areas of our lives as well.
It's like a ripple effect, almost. Okay, but it gets even more interesting. The article then claims that Bitcoin could bring about an era of, and I'm quoting here, true capitalism. Their argument is that it'll decentralize capital, taking power away from, the big banks and institutions and putting it back in the hands of everyday people. How realistic is this whole decentralized financial system thing?
What's really captivating is this whole concept of decentralized finance, or DeFi. It's pretty complex, but basically, it's about using blockchain technology to create a financial system that doesn't need those traditional middlemen, like banks. Imagine going from these huge power grids to a system where everyone generates their own energy. Everyone has more control in the system, but it also means being responsible for your own resources.
It's like we're talking about a whole new way of life, not just changing how we use money. But wouldn't a system like that, with no central control, come with its own problems?
Oh, for sure. Decentralization sounds great, and it can be really empowering, but it also makes things more complicated. Think about regulation, for example. In a system that's designed to avoid having one authority figure, how do you make sure everything is fair? How do you stop people from taking advantage of the system? These are tough questions, and the people who are really into DeFi, they're trying to figure out the answers. How they solve these problems, it could really change the future of finance.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory for sure. And the article seems to get that, right? They see the potential, but also the risks that come with shaking things up so drastically. But let's switch gears a bit. The article also talks about how different generations see Bitcoin. They make the point that younger generations, these digital natives who've grown up with this technology, they could be the ones who make Bitcoin mainstream. Is it just a case of like the younger generation rejecting the old ways, or is there something more going on there?
It's always interesting to see how new technology changes things generationally. I mean, think about how older people first reacted to the internet. Some were totally against it, even scared of it, right? But younger people, they just dove right in. And now, we can't imagine life without the internet. So it makes sense that we might see the same thing happen with crypto. Young people, they're already used to digital currencies, and this whole idea of decentralization isn't weird to them. They might be the ones who finally make Bitcoin a normal part of our financial system.
It's like they have this head start. They've never known a world without this stuff, while some of us are still trying to wrap our heads around it. But even if younger people are the early adopters, the article's prediction is for 2050. That's like 25 years from now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a long time. We can't forget how much can change in that amount of time. I mean, think about 20 years ago. Did we know social media would be this huge? Did we know smartphones would change how we communicate so much? Technology moves fast, things in society change, unexpected stuff happens all the time. So while the article's vision is interesting, we can't take it as a guarantee.
So it's more about keeping an open mind, right? Thinking about the possibilities without assuming we know exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly. It's about thinking critically and questioning what we think we know. We're not just along for the ride when it comes to the future. The choices we make, the ideas we get behind, they all play a part in shaping what's to come.
And that's kind of what we do here on the deep dive, right? We take a topic and, well, we dive deep. We try to look at all sides of it, even the complicated parts.
That's right. And by doing that, we often find unexpected things, make connections we didn't see before. It helps us understand the topic better. Yeah.
This whole conversation has definitely given me a new perspective on, like, what a Bitcoin-driven future could look like, the good and the bad. What about you? What parts of this article really stood out?
For me, the most interesting thing wasn't about Bitcoin becoming this dominant force or anything like that. It was the questions the article raised. It made me think about our current financial systems, how we define value. Are these centralized institutions really doing what's best for us? Are there different models we should be exploring? How do we even measure wealth in a world that's becoming more and more digital? These are important questions that we need to be thinking about no matter what happens with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's like the article's reminding us that sometimes the most valuable thing isn't finding all the answers, but realizing there are even more questions to ask. It really does make you realize how much we still don't know. This whole deep dive has been full of those moments.
It's true, isn't it? We often learn the most when we start questioning things we thought we knew for sure and really try to see things from different angles.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I had one last thought. It might sound a little out there, but, well, the article is really focused on Bitcoin itself, right? What if, and just hear me out here, what if Bitcoin, the actual cryptocurrency, isn't the big takeaway in the long run? What if it's the ideas behind it? Things like decentralization, transparency, focusing on long-term value. What if those are the things that really change things, even if Bitcoin fades away?
That's a really interesting point. Bitcoin is kind of like this spark. It's got people talking about the future of money, questioning the systems we've always just accepted. Even if Bitcoin doesn't become like the world currency, the way it's changed how we think about value, that can have a huge impact. I mean, imagine a world where those core principles, transparency, putting power in the hands of individuals, thinking about the long game. Imagine if those were built into our financial systems. That's something worth thinking about, no matter what technology ends up winning in the end.
Right. It's almost like Bitcoin planted a seed. Even if it doesn't grow into the biggest tree in the forest, those ideas it represents, they could take root and grow in ways we can't even imagine yet.
Exactly. We have to be open to the unknown, embrace the fact that the future isn't set in stone. And these conversations, these are so important. They make us question things, rethink what's possible, and that can lead to real change.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of this. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Bitcoin, wealth, and the future of finance. Until next time, keep those brains working and never be afraid to challenge the status quo.